thinking a lot about inventions lately, and one of the biggest inventions in modern history is the internet. And with every invention, there's a lot of give and take, I believe. With the internet, for example, you have vast amounts of knowledge that no one person could ever learn it all. And then on the other hand, the take part of the give and take is social media, that I think is slowly rotting our brains and turning us into antisocial beings. It's really strange, I think, that something that can bring people from across the world so close is making the people closest to you so further away. In a way, I don't think people truly are understanding how bad it is for all of us, especially with having our phones on us pretty much 24/7. It's dropping the attention span of everyone, most importantly children, who are getting their phones and tablets at 2-3 years old and know how to use a computer better than their parents by the time they're 5. I think it's really strange that we've let it get this far. And I don't want anybody to think that I think the internet is entirely horrible. Like I said, it's one of the greatest inventions ever. But I really think that we have to start monitoring the amount of internet we use, which would include, social media, subscription-based services like Amazon, Netflix, Hulu. All these things, they create conversations that end up in echo chambers where people just mimic what the other person says, or they fight an ungodly amount of time on whatever comment section or Twitter feed or anything like that. They really lose sight of the person that's behind the screen. And it's a lot easier with some other social media platforms where you can be completely anonymous, because then you can just be anything you want to be, and you don't really have to suffer the consequences. I really want to limit the time I spend on my phone and watching TV, because I think for myself it's gotten a little too much. About every day my phone tells me that I've spent 2 hours looking at that screen, and who knows how many hours watching TV. And for people out there doing the exact same thing, collectively that's, whole lifetimes being wasted doing nothing really. Because some people, they just doom scroll for hours, where they'll sit on TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, and just sit there and scroll, not even paying attention to what is put in front of their eyes. And because of that, it's also, like I said, lowering our attention span to where we can't even keep a conversation with another person. And then we're also constantly looking at our phones, and we can't even look other people in the eyes. People have become so antisocial while being extremely sociable online, just for likes and views and stuff. It's kind of crazy, actually, that the phones that we have today are kind of like people's best friends, because instead of getting affirmations from the people that surround them, they're getting affirmations from the people that surround them from behind a screen. So it's more like the screen is giving them affirmations than the person themselves. And since there's times where you don't even know who that person is behind that username, behind that screen, I think it creates a block in people's mind as to how to deal with taking in positive affirmations and criticism. I don't want to make it seem like kids are the only ones with this problem. It's little kids, teenagers, young adults, even the older generation. They find themselves spending a lot of time watching TV or being on Facebook or something like that. You have some people, they can't even sit in the same room and talk to one another. They will literally sit there and text each other instead of having an actual conversation. Or even instead of showing each other a video on their phone, they'll just send it to the other person's phone so they can then watch it. This is probably going to be a really short podcast episode because it is just me giving my opinions and feelings on the internet and social media and stuff. I love the internet and I love researching stuff and everything. I've learned so much, probably I'd say the past 5 years, just listening to YouTube videos, using, different resources. Wikipedia is probably like one of the biggest ones, aside from YouTube. Like, I really enjoy the internet and all the vast knowledge it has, because I do enjoy researching like real random stuff. Even the most randomest stuff, like on Reddit, they have the Today I Learned page, and you'll just learn the most random thing that you never would have thought you would have needed to know. Well, you don't need to know it, but it's kind of cool to know it. Like the other day I learned about I forget when he was born, but there was a guy who had a 7-inch long nose. That was really strange, but cool to learn. And I've learned how to grow food and stuff. I've learned how to work audio and everything because of YouTube to do this podcast. And even sometimes I do doom scroll to the point where like I'll be scrolling on my phone and wondering, what am I even doing? I haven't looked at a single post for the past 5 minutes, literally just scrolling. And then there's times where I'm watching a YouTube video on the TV and looking at my phone, trying to multitask, but I have no idea what's going on the TV while I'm looking at my phone. And then when I'm looking at the TV, I have no idea what's going on my phone. I feel like also using our phones in conversations can be useful, and it can actually create very fun conversations. Because you can get on some like weird, crazy topic and go down a rabbit hole, and then you're talking about stuff that you never thought you would have ever talked about, or you're learning things you never would have learned about. Or even the comedic side of the internet and social media, especially with videos on like YouTube and TikTok. People are having a blast actually just creating content, which is not a bad thing inherently. I think the bad part comes when you consume more than you create. And so maybe people should be more encouraged to create more than they look up. Like me, I'm creating this podcast. I've written a book. I'm writing another book. But I still feel like I don't create more than I look at on the internet. I definitely do a lot more watching than I do creating. And I can feel that sometimes. Like when I'm creating and everything, whether it's for the podcast or writing, it's almost like time stands still, but it moves faster than ever before. And I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but that's the only way I can describe it. Because unless I'm looking at something on YouTube or on my phone or whatever, and I'm actually enjoying it, it's almost like time takes forever and the day seems to drag on. And when I do the podcast, if it's, just me here or somebody else sitting across from me. It might be an hour and a half podcast and it felt like half an hour only went by. It just zoomed by. Even when I'm writing a book or writing or editing or whatever for it, the time just goes by so fast. When my son was around like 3 or 4 months, he would nap in the morning, and he would nap for probably like 4 or 5 hours sometimes in the morning. And that's when I would get a lot of my writing done. Those 4 or 5 hours didn't seem like anything. And it's funny to think about it now, because while I was writing, I would have YouTube on the TV in the background, and I would have to stop writing to pay attention because something interesting came on YouTube. And then when that interesting thing went away, I'd go back to writing. But it all just seems to go by so quick when I'm enjoying myself. Even with like gardening and everything, I don't spend much time out there. It doesn't take long to water all the plants and everything. I might be out there for 10 minutes, but it feels only like a few seconds. And it's strange how life feels like it's just zooming on by, even after the long moments that drag on forever. At the end of the day, when I'm laying in bed and everything, it seems like everything just went by so fast. Even though in the moment, it doesn't seem like it. Those long hours that just drag on when I might be, doom scrolling or just out of boredom, feel like I have nothing to do. They just seem to really drag on. And then at the end of the day, it's like, that felt like a couple of minutes. And I think that's a good way of looking at the internet as well, in a way, because now most of the content that people watch is under a minute, if not less than that. So all their enjoyment is usually wrapped up fairly quickly. Whereas a lot of the things I do take a lot of time, unless it's the watering of the plants, actually planting the garden, digging the holes for the seeds and everything, that takes time. But actually just watering them, that's nothing. But doing this podcast, I'll be talking to whoever for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then I have to edit the podcast, and then I have to re-listen to it once it's out and make sure everything went right and I don't have to go and fix everything. And writing the book, of course, writing a book takes, forever. It took me like 3 months to write the first book. I'm just now editing it. I started writing it in January of this year, and I'm just now getting around to editing it because I wanted to create distance from it. And I feel that creating distance between a lot of things is a good thing, like the internet, because I can tell when, at least for me, whenever I scroll too much or I watch too much TV, whether it be YouTube or something on Netflix or anything like that, I find that I not only lose track of time, but I almost lose track of myself. It's very strange in a way, only because I'll sit there and think like, oh, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, or I could, I could be writing and finishing the book or editing so that can get done faster. But I'm sitting here staring at the TV or staring at my phone, not doing anything. And I know it's not inherently the phone's fault, the internet's fault, the TV's fault. It's not their fault, it's my fault. But it's almost akin to an addiction, where it's like you can't stop it, even though you want to. And I've been working on myself and trying to make it to where I have less phone time, I have less TV time, and trying to do the things that I actually enjoy. Not that I don't enjoy television or learning new stuff on the internet. or even sometimes just scrolling and finding a funny video to watch or something. Like, for example, I've been watching Law and Order SVU. My wife got me into the show. And sometimes, I would say most of the time the show's good. There's some times where it's like, I don't care what's happening on the TV at all or anything. And the same thing with YouTube. It's sometimes like there's so much content to watch, I feel like, that it's almost overwhelming. And then there are times where I feel like there's absolutely nothing to watch. And it's almost like when you go to your fridge or your pantry for a snack or something to eat, and you don't have that specific thing you have a taste for, even though you don't know what you have a taste for. And so you don't wind up eating because it's not there or it's not readily accessible. This is going to sound like a rambling mess, but that's okay because it's just me. And it's my first time doing a podcast episode by myself. I really didn't plan anything ahead of this. I was thinking about previously, right before I started, about the internet and all that kind of stuff. And like other inventions, that's been created throughout time. And it's almost like with every invention, people get lazier, but it also helps them out. Like with the internet, you no longer have to go to the library and find that specific book and look through that entire specific book for that one piece of knowledge that you need for one reason or another. But just like with the internet, you have machines now that pretty much make every single thing in your home. A lot of things aren't handmade anymore, which is, a good thing and a bad thing, I think, because people no longer have to do insanely back-breaking work just to get one thing made. We can just have the machine do it automatically, whether it be plastics, which are made by a mold and then hardened over time, or cars that are just assembled together by machines that are automated. And although all these inventions are great, I do think people need to take more time and start doing things by hand. They don't even have to get out of the house. Just find a little hobby or something that you can keep yourself preoccupied. So that way you can get away from the phone and get away from the TV. Or if it's something you can do or would like to do, while watching something, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think some inventions might go a little too far, like genetics tampering. I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but they're starting to make it to where it's impossible. I don't know if they're exactly starting it or if they're trying trials on probably mice, because that's the main one that they use now for scientific experimentation. But I was reading something about how they're trying to create it to where humans will no longer have the ability to grow cancer cells because they tampered with the genetics to stop cancer cells from growing. And while yes, cancer is a horrible thing and should never exist, I think personally tampering with human genetics and DNA is a weird road to go down, because I've also read that they're also trying to get rid of addictions. So like if you're predispositioned to be addicted to like alcohol or something like that, they're trying to stop that as well, which once again is not inherently a bad thing, but we don't know the ramifications of doing stuff like this yet. And we may not know for years to come, just like with the internet again. When the internet came out with like instant messenger and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure it was a real nice place to be. But now you have places like Twitter mostly, where they have small confined echo chambers where people only stay within their group, and the only time they venture out is to, I don't know, cause chaos, have fights about stupid little petty things on the internet. You'll have people, they have nothing to do with the situation, and they're sitting there fighting about it. I don't know, to me it just feels like a waste of energy. Because you're not even having a real conversation with somebody. You're just stating your opinion, putting it out there, and then ending it. Or it turns into a fight on the internet, which is like it's just so dumb to me. Like, this is like, I mean, this is pretty much that. I'm just sitting here saying my opinion, but at least it's not turning into a fight. I guess I'm really just making this episode. Maybe somebody will hear it and they're like, you know what? I need to just get off my phone a little more. Maybe you stop watching TV as much as I do. Because I find when I'm creative and actually, I don't want to say working because it's fun, but when I'm doing things and I'm enjoying it and all that, it's so much better than watching a YouTube video, watching a movie, looking stuff up on the internet. Even though researching, I do enjoy that. So, I guess not so much the last part. I also think with all the inventions that are helping us in certain ways, like I said, are also hurting us. And that people need to start doing more stuff the old ways that we used to do them, just so that way we don't lose that part of our humanity in a way. Like, sometimes it might be nice to pull out a book and look up that piece of information if you have the book, or it might even be a nice day to go to the library and spend the day there researching stuff. Or even when it comes to other things, making your own bread or growing your own food without the use of, machines and stuff. Instead of using a tractor because I know they have those, I don't know exactly what the machines are called, but they have those ones where you basically just drive, and as you drive, it digs a trench, plants the seed, and then covers it all in one go. And then on that same machine, if you take off that hardware and you put on another piece of hardware, once the season is done and it is time to get the fruits of your labor out of the ground, you just put on a piece of hardware on the machine and you just start going, and it starts plucking whatever you grew out of the ground. Which, don't get me wrong, it's great and everything. That's amazing that we have that kind of technology. But I do think sometimes we gotta go back to how it used to be. You put the seed in the ground, or you dig the hole, you put the seed in the ground, you cover it, you go outside and water it every single day, make sure it's getting enough sunlight, making sure the soil around it is healthy enough for it. And then when it comes time for the end of the season, or, middle of the season, and the fruit or vegetable or whatever is big enough, you pull it, take it, and have a home-cooked meal. And maybe that's kind of like what content is in a way, how I was saying before, where you should create more than you consume. Instead of going out and buying bread, you could stay home, use the stuff you have already there, and make bread. Or you could, instead of going on TikTok and watching a video, you could be on your phone creating something. And instead of getting that little dopamine rush that you get from that, 15-second TikTok or whatever, you might get like a half-hour dopamine rush because you spent all this time creating something, and then you have to edit it. And even the editing process can be fun, depending on what you're doing. I just really think people need to start doing more. And I know some people will say, well, I already do enough. I work, and then I go home, got stuff to do at home, this, that, and the other, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments. And then all that time that you do spend on your phone could be used for other things. Even video games. Video games can be almost like a crutch, keeping people from doing other things that they might enjoy. Now, I'm not saying video games are inherently bad, but it can get to a point where it is, I would say, detrimental for your health. Not only physically, but mentally and all that. I will say, though, at least video games will keep your attention span longer than scrolling through TikToks that only last a few minutes a piece. And even movies. It feels like movies nowadays, they constantly have to have some sort of action happening. And I don't mean like a fight scene or cars exploding or anything like that. It just really feels like they can't let an emotional scene happen. Or just two actors actually acting. There always has to be, I don't know, something happening. I guess that's because the only movies I see nowadays on TV are, like all the Marvel superhero movies and whatever Dwayne Johnson, whatever his new movie is that comes out, it feels like every 3 months. But yeah, I know this podcast episode is kind of, well, it's going to be real short and probably really weird because it's just me throwing my thoughts into this microphone. And if anybody listened, I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you for listening. Last thing I gotta say is, stop watching TV so much. Get off the phone. Maybe play a little less video games. And start actually creating something. If you're into movies, make your own movie. You probably got a phone in your pocket that's got a decent enough camera. Learn how to do lighting and everything. Make your own movie. If you're into video games, chances are you have a decent enough computer to make at least a decent video game. You can learn how to make a video game in Unreal Engine or Unity. I know those are two software apps that you can use to make games. And even if you're into YouTube or TikToks, same thing with a movie. You got a phone in your pocket, chances are it's got a good enough camera. Just start creating stuff. Alright, that's enough for me. Thanks again for listening.